Welcome to the Lead Every Day show. Our mission is to see a world well led. And our strategy to get there? To empower leaders like you to lead every day. So let's get to work.
How amazing would it be if you had a high performance team? I've noticed that high performance teams are made up of talented people, highly talented people. It's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to unpack the difference in top talent and typical talent. Welcome to the Lead Everyday Show. I'm Randy Gravitt.
And I'm Mark Miller.
And Mark, we landed yesterday with sort of a suspended there, like what would it look like for us to be able to attract these top talented people versus typical talent. I've worked with all kind of companies in the past few years, and it's interesting. I've been in a couple of trade organizations, people that you know they're skilled plumbers and electricians, and we've had some of this conversation because they've had a hard. You were talking about at Chick-fil-A, you had some turnover. I think the payroll there nationwide was, I've heard, as high as 80% of them were 16 to 21 year olds. I mean, you're talking about
young people,
yeah. And
it's probably 70 or 75% if you go to 21.
You start talking to plumbers and electricians, they'll tell you that they're having a hard time keeping people. And I always told them, you don't want people who can just pass a drug test. That was their thing. Like, if they can pass a drug test, we'll hire them. I'm not sure. Once you hire them, you got to lead them. And I think there's danger in that. So we're not really talking here about C and D players. There's probably a place for them. But if you're trying to build a world-class organization, you got to have really great people around your table, whether you're doing electrical work or you're selling chicken or building a baseball team or whatever you're doing. We're talking A and B players here, not C's and D's.
Yeah.
And there's a difference in A's and B's that we discovered as we were doing the talent
typical
work. Let's talk about the difference here.
Yeah, the typical player are more the B player.
Yeah.
We really didn't devote any time to C and D players because you don't want them,
That's
you don't need them.
That's not what you're looking for.
And you gotta upskill them or get them out.
Right.
I mean, but how do you get A players instead of B players, and how do you help B players become A players?
Yeah.
That's really what we're talking about.
Yeah. When we did this work, we did some research and had an opportunity to do a lot of interviewing, and it was kind of crazy. You said yesterday this was the first time this question had been asked, like, how do you attract? And there were a bunch of companies, like big time companies, who were kind of in on it. You know, they're like, we'll help you out. Think about this. And it was crazy. I don't know how you did this, but you talked them into giving us a copy of their employee reviews. You know,
performance
data, which was anonymous, not but protected. But it was pretty incredible. We said the A players would be people who got the highest performance review for the last 3 years in a row every year.
Yeah.
And the B
which
players,
I never qualified, by the way, as an A player.
Yeah.
We set the bar.
Yeah. Well, we were asking the question.
No, we didn't have to be A players. That's right.
But the B players were ones who got the highest review at least one time in the last, but not all 3 years. At least 1 year, but not all three. And we did find out there are some things that are different about these two groups, which was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. And one thing I did not mention yesterday when I was sharing the backstory is we ended up including over 7,000 people in this study. Yeah. This was a huge study.
And so we do kind of have the answers to the test here.
We do know.
Which is pretty cool that we'll think about. Well, let's talk here for a second about A's versus B's for somebody who might be listening today. Like, how would you know who your A players are without this stuff? We're going to share it, but as you begin to think about it, you got a list of questions that'll help them. I think think about that.
Sure,
give them some of those questions.
And let me say, it's a qualitative assessment in the real world. You're not going to apply the rigor that we did. We had some really smart people, PhD statisticians helping us with all this, and that's great. Thankful for those people. But when you're trying to figure out who your A players are, I think there's some questions that'll help. One is, who are the people you'd hate to lose? That's really a clue. I'd hate to lose that person. Yeah. And you probably got some folks coming to mind. The folks that you wouldn't mind losing, that's a different
They might not even be a B player.
Yeah, maybe they're not.
Yeah.
How about this? If you were going to start over, let's say you're going to start your own company, who are the people you'd want to take with you? Mm-hmm. That might be another clue. If you're thinking about your leadership team, I've often asked leaders. I had one leader tell me, but here's the context. I said, tell me about your leadership team. And he said, well, I really don't have one. And this was a high-performing leader. And I said, well, how does that work? And he said, well, I've got about 80 leaders, which, great. He had actually created a leadership culture, which is one reason he was performing so well. And I said, yeah, but I think you may want to consider having a leadership team. And he said, how would I choose? And I said, well, if you had to make a strategic decision with significant implications for the future health and vitality of your business, who are the 5 or 6 people
that you want to talk to,
that you'd want around your table?
Yeah,
he said,
good.
I know exactly who they are.
That's good.
I said, well, hey, that might be your leadership team.
Yeah.
And my guess is they're all A players.
Yeah.
So you got to sort through for you, what is that profile?
Yeah, that's good. We're going to unpack these next few days, what it is that attracts them. But here's a good thought. What if the leader who's listening could go and identify 2 or 3 of those people that come to mind? Who would I definitely hire again? Who would I ask if I had a big question?
Yeah, I didn't even mention that one. Who would I definitely hire again? That's a good question.
You know, who would be the first person I would hire? I mean, that's your A. These are A players. You might even go have a conversation with them at some point over. You can validate what we're going to talk about, I'm guessing, because this is crazy. When you start asking people who are top talented people, and they've been, this is who you need to talk to. We've had all this. They all say the same thing. The things we're going to unpack here are, and I know we're kind of teasing, they're themes here, and we're kind of teasing it a little bit, but there really are. And I'm guessing your people would say, this is what we have to have in place. We'll call them. We're gonna begin to dive into these as we go, but I'll call them conditions of employment for a top talented person.
Mm-hmm.
They might come. You can fool them into coming if you say you have this, but if you don't have it, you got to deliver on what we're talking about. But they're not even coming if
right.
You're not going to attract them if you don't have these things in place.
Well, yeah, and let me say this, and this is kind of the cold, hard facts that some leaders kind of bristle when I say this. Top talent does not have to work for you. Top talent has choices. Your A players, the folks we just described that come to mind,
they can leave.
They could work thousands of places.
That's right.
Because they're top talent, and every organization wants them. So it's in our best interest as leaders to actually provide them what they want. And I think you're going to be surprised. It's probably not some of the things that you think it is. And it may be, it's not the stuff you're providing. I was with a group last week and we talked about this, and they are not providing what we're going to talk about. They're providing some other stuff that they're really proud of, and they can't attract and keep top people.
Yeah.
As an industry,
yeah,
their whole industry is suffering.
Yeah.
But they're not providing what we're about to talk about. And so that was one of the takeaways. I did a keynote. Actually, it was a workshop for them. I was with them for several hours. And the host that had pulled it together, he said, that's the crux of the problem, is we're so proud of what we're providing, and it's not what top talent wants.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get no credit for doing the wrong thing well. I mean, we say that all the time. It really is not. And I ask people this question, like, what do you think it is that attracts them when I do these workshops as well? And so many times they think it's another $1 an hour, or it's a raise, and you got to pay them. I mean, we'll talk about that, but you got to pay them. But that's not what that's not what came up in the data. And so we'll start to dive into that as we continue this conversation as we go. But it really is, if you want to do something great, you're going to need great people around your table. There are some things you can do to attract people from the outside. They say, that's where we want to work. Conditions of employment, we'll call them. We put those in place. You'll be surprised. Your applicant pool is going to improve as you go forward. You're going to find yourself attracting much better people. Attracting and keeping is the subtitle to the book. If you haven't picked up Talent Magnet, I do encourage you to do that. You can go to leadeveryday.com and get your copy. Come back tomorrow. We're gonna continue this conversation. We're gonna give you some things that you can do to begin to attract the best of the best. All right. Remember, the best leaders lead every day.